We welcome everybody to Natural Resources, Agriculture and Environmental House Committee. Appreciate you being here. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from last time. Can I get a motion on that? February 6th? 7th, February 7th. It's been moved. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Also, we need an approval for the corrected minutes of January 30th. Staff found a correction that needed to be made. So thank you, Representative Watkins. Moved. All in favor say aye. Motion carries. Okay, let's see. We have an announcement. We need to make an announcement and a change to the agenda. We are HB 338 will not be heard today. And we have a second sub of Senate Bill 112 that'll be heard first today by Senator Sandel. And then HB 188 will be heard last, which is golf-related water modifications. Representative Welton. With that, Senator Sandel, thank you for being here. We'll turn the rest of the time over to you. She got it. Let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the time to present this bill. Committee members, let me kind of give you the genesis for this bill. So I believe most of us are all aware of quagga mussel and the invasive aquatic species that we have. We've discovered it in Lake Powell. Fortunately, at this point, we've been able to hold it there through a lot of effort, through a lot of cleaning, dip tanks, a lot of kind of things. We just don't want this to spread. We know that. Currently, we're funding that with a $10 fee on your boat registration and a $10 aquatic invasive species per boat per year. Okay, so we're funding it $20 through those two items. It's come to the attention of department that the Coast Guard has a rule that we cannot collect that money through boat registration anymore, or embedded in the boat registration. So what this bill does is it gets us in compliance with the Coast Guard by removing the $10 fee that's embedded in the boat registration and removing the $10 invasive species fee that we've been paying and moving that $20 to a sticker that we now will ask to be applied to our watercraft. So it's net neutral. We're going to reduce those other two fees by $20, and we're going to ask the boating public, per kind of what the Coast Guard's going to require us, to put this additional sticker on the boat, and we'll have to collect that through a different fund, a funding source. Net neutral to the public. We have a interstate agreement with Arizona, so that our stickers will be valid in Arizona water on Lake Powell, and their stickers will also be. And we're going to have to do that to be in compliance and to continue to fund the program. I'm going to, if it's okay, part of my presentation, go to the director, Jay Shirley, and let him comment.
Thank you, Jay Shirley, Director of the Division of Wildlife Resources. Really appreciate the work that's been done to solve this problem. We were in a good spot, had this figured out until we recognized the rule change and the need to make that change, which was explained in great detail by the sponsor, and I think in a manner that makes sense. This is important to protecting the state's waterways and to make sure that our boating public is aware of the program. We appreciate the work that's been done here.
Well, that ends our presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sandel. We'll bring it back to the committee for clarifying questions. Let's see, Representative Shipp.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This may not be germane to this right now, but and I know how important this is. Believe me, I've spent a lot of time on Lake Powell, and but if somebody leaves the lake early enough in the morning, they get missed by somebody that's checking for your watercraft that's leaving. However, I do know by sad experience in some cases where we show up at Quail Creek to boat, and we haven't had it out of Lake Powell long enough to be able to, and then I have to go clear over to Sand Hollow to get it washed. So I think it's really critical that we continue to make sure, because those quagga mussels, they can be really bad. They are bad at Lake Powell and plug up a lot of motors and stuff that of those houseboats that sit on the lake. But I really appreciate what you're doing, but is there anything that you can do to catch some of those that leave early or come in late and so forth into Lake Powell, Director?
Yes, thanks for that question. So a couple, again, the having 24-hour ramp coverage has been hard depending on the time of the year and when the ramps are open. We've had water issues, obviously, ramp closures at Lake Powell. We do have dip tanks that are going to be around the state. We're working on a couple more of those dip tanks, as well as what I would say is we have the legislature has funded a pilot study for cameras that go as you exit Lake Powell that are taking a picture of your bow number on your boat, and then that enters a database. So when you show up at another water, they're able to track that, and that study is ongoing. And we have a new vendor there that we're excited about the future possibilities of that and knowing where boats are going from Lake Powell. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Representative Ship. Representative Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a boat. I did one time a long time ago, but I don't now, and I'm not involved in that. Darn. But explain, what is this, just for me, this, excuse me, invasive species decal? What does that do? What, you do it every time? Or is it a one-time thing? I just explain it to me.
thank you. That's a great question. It will be something that you pay annually with your registration. You'll get a decal. Again, we had to separate that out from the registration because of Coast Guard rules, but it will be an annual fee that you will pay. Again, it becomes net neutral for the boater because it's coming off of their registration costs. But we will, as the division, be sending them a decal.
So what does the decal do?
I might understand what you're asking. So every year you get a different color and a different number for your boat registration.
Right.
You place that on. This will be a companion sticker to the side of it that once again will probably either change color or something else to indicate that you've paid for the year. So you will receive those stickers presumptively at the same time as you register your boat. You'll just place the one sticker for the annual registration, and you'll place the other sticker for the aquatic invasive species payment on your boat, on the bow.
Does that help pay for the services for the boat
Yes,
to be
that-
cleaned and checked?
yes,
Is that what it does?
yes.
Okay, that's what I
That-
wasn't
that-
quite sure about.
yeah.
So, okay.
And so that fee currently is $20, but it's embedded in your boat
Right,
registration.
so you're going
now
to separate.
we have to separate it.
I get that. I
and-
just didn't know what the decal
Yeah, and there
is,
will be
so-
a separate sticker that will be colored according to the year that you've paid for, and we'll rotate probably through colors,
Okay.
simply like we do with the boat registration, numbers, years, and colors.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Watkins. Representative Benyon.
Thank you.
There we go.
This sounds like, I think the sponsor of this sounds like an elegant solution to a problem, and it's a very reasonable charge. I wonder if it covers the costs of the program and what other states charge. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you if I might, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So currently, we've been not doing a very good job on out-of-state boaters because we don't have a way to track that. This bill also, I forgot to recognize, will mandatorily out-of-state boaters will have to purchase the sticker at $25. So there's a differential between in-state and out-of-state boaters. To your heart of your question, there's always more that we can do around this space. If the sticker was $40, we'd have more dip tanks. We'd have more surveillance. We'd have more people on the ground. We're trying to find the spot that allows us to do the job without being too overburdening on our boating public. But we'll have to continue to assess what our needs are. If Director Shirley has anything to add to that, but I do think, yeah, there's always places we could do something more.
The only thing I would add, if I may, is that the program has been very successful to this point. It's been a little over, we just are hitting a decade since quagga mussel was found in Lake Powell, and we've been able to keep it there. And so there's a lot of work and a lot of adjustments, but we have had really good support, and the program's been successful.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could ask a question, so just to clarify, out-of-state boaters will be required to buy this, to purchase this stamp also.
That is correct, unless it's an Arizona sticker, and then we have a reciprocal agreement there. I failed to ask also on our neighbors in Idaho on Bear Lake.
No, they would need one.
They will need one to be in Utah waters. So Arizona has a going to move to this kind of a program. So if they have paid in Arizona, their sticker will be valid in Utah, and ours will be valid in the Arizona water in Lake Powell. But out-of-state boaters will have to purchase the $25 for them decal before they can launch a boat in Utah.
And just to follow up, when they come into Utah from out of state, say Colorado, will they be required to have their boats washed before they can launch?
I believe they're under the same requirements as the Utah boater is.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Any other clarifying questions from the members? Let's go to the public. Anyone here from the public that wants to speak to this issue? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to committee for action and discussion. Representative Shipp.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to make a motion to move out with a favorable recommendation, second sub SB 112. And I'd like to just make a comment on that. I can remember back when we were trying to keep quagga mussels out of Lake Powell too. And I think finally it became too big of a problem, and so then we just started trying to keep them from coming anywhere else into Utah. But it's invasive, it's damaging to things. We definitely want to keep them out of our other lakes and reservoirs in the state. So with that, I'm through with my speech.
That motion is in order. Thank you. Back to the sponsor.
I'll waive.
The sponsor waives. Back to the maker. Waive the motion. The motion is to move out second substitute SB 112, Aquatic Invasive Species Amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I rule that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Oh, is there any opposed? Well, we'll get it. You guys are good. All right. Let's see. Representative Snyder, HB 299. Infrastructure-related water, and there's a second substitute.
Correct.
Will
And
you
if-
be speaking to the substitute?
I will be speaking to the second substitute, and if I may, I'd like to invite Jason Curry up to present with me as well with the Office of Outdoor Recreation.
Welcome.
Okay. Well, appreciate the committee's time and the opportunity to present. Before I kind of get into the gist of the presentation, just to clarify the significant differences between HB 299 and HB $2.99 second substitute. The second substitute deletes the grant program and the access fee portions that were going to be submitted to state parks. So you'll see just deletions, and then there's a little bit of modification in the second half. But anyway, so going on to what we're trying to do here. So this is not an original idea. I think it's a wonderful, great, amazing idea, but it is not mine. This was done by a good representative who served here for many years, who you know, Representative Mike Noel. So for years ago, he stood up this program for the OHV community. So basically, what it does is it transfers a portion of property taxes that would otherwise go to the county to a grant-making program, which facilitates the creation of trails and all of those things for the OHV program. And now, in the wake of increased pressures on our water bodies, we're attempting to do the same thing with watercraft. So this isn't a new fee. This isn't any sort of new monies being collected from anybody with a boat, but rather a redirection into hopefully what will be as successful for water as it was for land. So this bill would create within the Office of Outdoor Recreation a Utah Boating Grant account, which would allow the Office of Outdoor Recreation to submit grants across water bodies in the state to help with basic infrastructure needs, docks, piers, if a facility is crumbling due to wave action, which is something that we discussed earlier in another committee during interim. And it would also help support search and rescue, which, as many of you know, in rural Utah is a critical need that almost has no funding at all, or at least not enough. So it would allow counties, water districts, the state to apply for grants that could then take this money and apply it on these different reservoir sites. So with that, I turn just a moment over to our director here and then offer any time for questions.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jason Curry, and I'm the director of the Utah Division of Outdoor Recreation. And like the sponsor said, this bill will take that model that we've used to be able to create world-class OHV trails and apply that same type of program to launch ramps, docks, and all of the other amenities that our boating community rely on right now. There's a backlog, and think there are a lot of things that are not in good shape. So with $387 million contributing to the Utah economy from boating, including fishing, wakeboarding, and other boat uses, we're excited to be able to put this money on the ground to make our amenities world-class, just like we have with our OHV program. So we're very supportive of this and thank the sponsor for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Does that conclude your
concludes my
presentation?
Thank you.
We'll bring that back to the committee for discussion or for clarifying questions. I'm sorry. Any clarifying questions? Representative Shipp.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Does this change any fees or additional fees other than what are already being picked up at state parks and so forth?
Thank you. No, it doesn't. It's a redirecting of existing funding streams. The first sub would have created a new per head fee that would have been used for infrastructure. This second sub strips all of that out and is simply a redirecting of existing monies.
So the fiscal note that there is, that's just redirected it from somewhere else, pulling it from somewhere else?
Correct. Yeah, and there was the ongoing $130,000 cost, which was in the original fiscal note, was for administration of that other program that's since been deleted from the bill.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Any other clarifying questions? I have one. Is there, as far as lakes and reservoirs are concerned, is there a priority or some level of size or activity or use on their reservoir, or is this strictly confined to state parks? How do you qualify a reservoir?
If I could give that question to Jason, as he'll be administering this.
Yeah, so it will be a grant program. So yeah, any boating body of water, including state park or some of our places like Flaming Gorge, Pine View, Lake Powell, that are not state parks would be eligible to apply for the grant. So the priority list necessarily is not in place, but the grants will be scored according to their merit, just like the other grant programs that we administer using a committee.
Thank you. Let's see, is there anyone from the public here that would like to speak to this? If so, come on up. We'll go to public comment. Please state your name and sign in and who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tracy Glover. I'm the Kane County Sheriff and the Vice President of the Utah Sheriff's Association. And we speak in support of this bill. Representative Snyder's been really good to work with us on a couple of modifications that have helped us out. I speak from the perspective of search and rescue, law enforcement search and rescue, but particularly as it relates to the bill search and rescue. I have about half of Lake Powell in my county. What some people may not know is I have primary jurisdiction as the sheriff for law enforcement and search and rescue on Lake Powell. And, being able to purchase equipment to get around on Lake Powell can become pretty prohibitive for a small county like Kane County. So this bill will redirect some funds that are currently being assessed and will make them available for search and rescue equipment, which will benefit us. And we appreciate, as I said, the sponsor being able to work with us on a couple of modifications. I've talked to Representative Noel, former Representative Noel, about this a couple times. He's working on a water well in Johnson Canyon today, so I told him that it would be great to hear from him online, but he wasn't able to make it. But he also supports this. This was kind of his brainchild on the ATV side or OHV side, and that's been a very popular program and has provided some funding for search and rescue equipment as well through that program that's been beneficial to us as sheriffs. So I would urge your support on this bill and appreciate your work.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? With that, we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to the committee for discussion. Seeing none. Sorry about that. Representative Peterson.
I would move that we pass HB. Oh,
Yeah,
that we
we'll
move
need-
that we
we'll need
move
to-
the sub.
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
I would make a motion that we move sub 2 to adopt sub 2.
Move to adopt sub 2. That motion is in order. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Sorry. We'll go to Representative Benyon. There we go. No.
I recommend that we move House Bill 299 first sub out with a favorable recommendation.
That motion is in order. Would you like to speak to that?
It's a wonderful bill.
Thank you. Let's see. Representative Peterson, did you have a comment? There.
The motion was first sub. Are we moving first sub or second sub?
Second sub.
Second sub. So that we move out House Bill 299 infrastructure related to water, second sub with a favorable recommendation.
There we go. Thank you. That motion is in order. Would you like to speak to that motion again?
I waive.
You could say it's a great bill again. I'm totally fine with that.
I think she did. Okay. Any discussion to the motion? All right. And back to the sponsor.
I'll waive. Thank you.
And back to Representative Benyon.
I waive.
Comment? Okay, the motion is to move out HB 299 with the second sub with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I rule that motion passes. Thank you, Representative Snyder. Well done. And now
Can I?
we'll move on to HB 349. HB 349, water reuse projects amendment. And is there a second sub with this also? Okay. Representative Snyder will.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the time of the committee, and I'll try not to monopolize the entire committee time this morning. This is another bill that came through the interim, at least in concept, through Water Development Commission, which many of you sit on. So as you know, we've got some water reuse is becoming more and more proficient and more widely utilized in our state as the price of water increases and the amount of water decreases. In places like southern Utah or areas of the state that use water from the Colorado, using and reusing again water makes a significant amount of sense. And we're making those types of investments down there, and we'll continue to do so this session. However, we're in a little bit of a different situation up north in the Great Salt Lake, where every drop we reuse, if it is depleted from the system, only aggregates to the problem of a shrinking lake. So there's studies that have come out of some of the sewer plants, or with the help of some of our sewer districts in this state, that have indicated if the state was to move to water reuse in the Great Salt Lake Basin, we would drop the lake by another 10 to 12 feet. So we would be, in effect, cutting off our nose to spite our face in the Great Salt Lake system. So in an attempt to obviously head off that potential collapse, as well as to make good on the investments that we've already made in terms of making sure that there is water for the lake, I'm bringing forward this bill to sort of clarify when it is appropriate and maybe when it is not appropriate to reuse water, specifically within the Great Salt Lake watershed. So the provisions of this bill are narrowly tailored in order to only impact that water basin. But in effect, what this would require it would say water reuse in the state of Utah is required to go through basically a process specifically tied to the state engineer, whereby we can ensure that there is an additional depletion when we implement reuse projects, as well as if there is going to be depletion, we have plans for mitigation and conservation of water to ensure that you can move forward if that's in the best interest of a community, but not over appropriate in the system. This bill does have carve-outs for existing projects, which I know is important. Obviously, we would have liked to have made sure everything was synced up sooner, but if folks have already made significant investments in infrastructure and water reuse projects, we allow those to be grandfathered in. There's also exemptions within the bill as it relates to federal water, which may seem ironic in the Great Salt Lake system, but actually CUP water, which originates in the Colorado, comes to the Great Salt Lake Basin, and that has federal mandates on it that would not allow us to place this type of prohibition on it. This also allows for, I know Salt Lake City, for example, is looking at water reuse as a way to bolster levels of the Great Salt Lake, and those types of projects would also be allowed to move forward. But again, this is about process, making sure we're honoring our investments and sort of dovetailing water reuse programs into the Great Salt Lake system. So with that, I'll yield any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. We'll bring it back to the committee for clarifying questions. Representative Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see a couple of substitutes that haven't been adopted. Is that the desire of the sponsor?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I should have clarified. I'm speaking to second sub.
Okay, thank you. Follow up.
Yes.
So it's quite remarkable that we actually have water from the Colorado come back to and available in the Great Salt Lake Basin area. Explain, if you could, Mr. Chair, maybe a project that this would apply to. I recognize the Central Utah Water Project prohibit the federal regulations there would prohibit that applying to those waters. Correct is what the sponsor. But what would be? Just give us maybe put a little color on an example that this would have
Yeah, so
impact on?
if a municipality receives water through the Central Utah project and their water right is derived from there, they would be allowed to reuse that water per their need. I believe South Jordan has Central Utah water in their system and they are moving forward with a water reuse program. My understanding is that's where their water comes from. They would not be subject to the same requirements because, as indicated, there are federal prohibitions that the state can't run counter to.
Is there an example of a future project that this would apply to that would help the committee understand the benefit of this bill? Which I agree with the benefit of the bill. I just wanted to, education wise.
Sure. So
Mr. Chair.
there are, if I may, there are water reuse projects in various stages across the basin, and I suspect there'll be a few in here that may testify during the public comment period. But places like Orem are moving forward. American Fork are moving forward with projects. In my district, HiRes, which is also part of the Great Salt Lake, has been for years recirculating some of their affluent discharges back into their secondary system. There are potential programs coming online which would take sewer discharges, treat it to a higher standard, and maybe even possibly reuse it as drinking water, M&I type stuff. And so there's a variety of projects. Now, all of those that are existing now, this would have no impact on going forward. But as we move into the future, let me back up. Some of those programs or projects that have been implemented have not coordinated with the state engineer. And so we are withdrawing additional water from the state because they've had a project approval from the Division of Environmental Quality, but have not gone through the water rights process. And so moving forward, this bill would sync those up so that we're all in alignment as we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One final question, if I may.
Representative Stratton.
So I do represent some of those areas that the good sponsor mentioned. Am I understanding then that there would need to be some additional permitting for those areas, those projects have commenced, or are they grandfathered away from this in the sinking process?
Representative Snyder.
Thank you. So every project that has already commenced, even if they've just submitted an application, is grandfathered in. So, and it is my intention. These are big ships that turn very slow, and so I don't want to interrupt in any way or fashion those that are already coming online with the second sub. But going forward, this would just so that people have a clear understanding of what the process will be. These will be the requirements for everybody coming online into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the sponsor as well.
Thank you, Representative Stratton. Representative Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize to the committee for not being here to hear the whole presentation, but you know how things go this time of the year when we're trying to be in 3 places at once. I failed to see the real need of this this proposal. It looks to me like we've already got this well covered with having to make an application with the state engineer in order to every time we touch water, we're supposed to get the permission to do it, and I failed to see that we really need this thing. It looks to me like that it's already covered with the state, within the state engineer's charter, what it's supposed to do, and so I'm struggling with the need for this. Thanks.
Can I respond to that? If
Representative Snyder.
So thank you for the question. Actually, Look, I'm as frazzled in schedules as anybody here. Like, I get it. So in my opening remarks, just to kind of repeat, when we went through Water Development Commission this summer, there was an indication that if all the systems that are currently in the Great Salt Lake, which is what this bill is tailored to, were to move to reuse, we would drop the lake by 10 to 12 feet. There is also in existence right now water reuse projects that have not been permitted by water rights. So they have gone through the water quality permitting process, but have not completely gone through the water rights process, as you indicated. So this bill closes that loop. because unfortunately they haven't gone through all that of what water rights does in moving forward with some of these water reuse projects. So unfortunately, in the absence of this bill, that could continue to happen as it has in the past. So I hope if that addresses your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heartily concur in the intent of this legislation. Representative Snyder, just wanted to ask you about the last line, 289. A water reuse project to supply water to the lake is an exception, and I'm sure there's a reason for that, but I hoped you'd speak to that.
Yeah, if I can. So again, the purpose of this bill is to ensure that water reuse, or the water that is discharged from affluent waste, continues to make it to the Great Salt Lake. That being the majority in times of the year of the water that goes into wetlands on the east side of the lake, as well as a lot of the flow of the Jordan at times. There are communities in this state, namely Salt Lake City, that is indicating that they're going to use water reuse to treat to a higher standard their water and then directly discharge it into Great Salt Lake. So they're not doing a water reuse program to resupply it for lawns or drinking water. Rather, they're doing a reuse program for direct application to Great Salt Lake. And that provision's meant to honor that commitment.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Owens. Representative Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just if I could ask a question regarding existing cities that are currently using culinary water for irrigation purposes. Would this, if in the future they want to move towards a secondary system, and as part of that secondary system would like to use the affluent from their waste treatment facility to use in the irrigation of lawns and things, would this prohibit that specifically?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So, no. The direct answer is no. So, but it's kind of a tiered response. So, under these projects that have already been approved, this bill obviously grandfathers them in. So, if they move to a program that was going to use additional water, they would have to go through obviously this application process. But if you, in the second sub, there's language that allows them to move forward as long as the state engineer approves the application with conditions to assure equivalent replacement of water. So it creates a conservation mechanism. So we're not banning reuse, we're just making sure that all of the water is accounted for as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Brooks.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. I just have a clarifying question. I couldn't find the definition of reuse because most of it's referring to like affluents or industrial grade type. But what about like a private industry? Does this, like car washes, that go through and they reuse like 90% of their water? Does this apply to them?
So in talking with the state engineer, it is no, right? Because they are not the owner of the water right. They are a purchaser of the okay. water. And so this is targeted at public suppliers of water, and there are definitions. I'd have to pull it up.
I think you answered my question with the owner of the water right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. I do have one question, Representative Snyder, just to clarify in my mind. This actually focuses on the Great Salt Lake, but it also pertains to the entire state. Is that correct?
If I may, actually no. It is only for Great Salt Lake. So, if you look at it, I'm trying to find the exact line really quick. If you obviously in the highlighted provisions, and then we can go through it because it's in several locations in the lake. But this is the prohibition of certain water reuse projects impacting the Great Salt Lake. So it is only for Great Salt Lake. There are other systems in this state where this would make absolutely no sense. This is a very unique system, and that's why it's targeted here.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. I certainly appreciate that. Seeing no other clarifying questions from the committee, we'll move to public discussion or public comment. Are there any here? Please raise your hands if you're here to speak to this. Let's see, 4. Do we have any online? and we have none online. So please come up, sign in, state your name, who you represent.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Justin Lee, representing the Utah League of Cities and Towns. I just want to thank Representative Snyder for working with us on this. As he mentioned, there are multiple municipalities who are far down the process on this one, and appreciate his efforts to figure out the right language so that we're not scuttling into their projects that are pretty far down there. So we may need to dot a couple more I's and cross a couple more T's to make sure we catch everybody. But he's been very amenable to working with us on that. I just want to express our appreciation.
Thank you. Please make sure you sign in. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. Billy Hesterman with the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council. We are a coalition of water treatment facilities that are in Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah counties. We've also been working with Representative Snyder, and I think our message would echo much of what the league just said. There are a few I's that need to be dotted and T's to be crossed, but we are very appreciative of Representative Snyder and the work he's done to help make this happen and help make sure that the things that we're trying to accomplish can still be accomplished. And we look forward to continue working as the bill progresses through the legislature. So thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Committee. My name is Brian Summers, President of Utah Mining Association. We appreciate Representative Snyder and working with our communities as well, the heavy industry communities, to make sure that nothing in this bill prohibits our continuing to advance some of the projects that our members have been working on to wisely use the water that we use in industrial processes and processing, and appreciate his willingness to work with us on language that's reflected in the second sub, and urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and representatives on the committee. I'm Ryan Luce from South Jordan City, one of those cities that was mentioned. We have a direct potable reuse project, one of the first in the state, and we're grateful for Representative Snyder and the carve-outs he's made and the grandfathering and his efforts in this, and we support his bill.
Thank you. Please remember to sign in. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Craig Smith. I'm an attorney with Smith Harvickson. I'm here on behalf of Bear River City, and I think there may be some others that follow this. First of all, I want to thank the representative for his willingness to work with us on the language in the bill. I think we're pretty much are very close to being there. Just to make you aware of the situation, of Bear River has a wastewater treatment facility. It has historically had the right to either discharge or its water into the Bear River, or to land apply it, i.e. irrigation. Sometimes land application is preferable because water quality standards continue to get higher and higher, and they sometimes have some time to catch up with those. I think there's several others. I've reached out to a couple other clients of ours, of town of Elwood and also the town of Corinne. But in any effect, to have land application, you now have to have a water reuse approval from the state engineer. We have filed for that with the and I think that's where the language, there may be some other cities to fit into that, but we need to continue to have that flexibility, else it puts us in a real jam, because if you have a situation where you can't discharge your water, you got to do something with the water. And so I think the representative is familiar with our situation. I think, like I say, if we need dot some I's or cross some T's like others said, we will. But thank you, Representative, for your working with us and making sure we don't find ourselves inadvertently caught up in a situation where we can't either discharge or land apply the water. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Clint Dilley. I'm the general manager for Magna Water District, and we are a community here in the valley that has been planning for reuse for about 30 years. And it's important for our community because we have secondary water
We take our groundwater and we're treating that water, and we own and operate the groundwater sources. It goes through a treatment process. It gets discharged to a wastewater treatment plant that we operate, and then it gets discharged into the C7 ditch, which eventually makes it to the Great Salt Lake. We've been planning, we have a secondary water system that currently uses water from the Utah Lake. It comes through the canal system, and that's our source of water. That water is historically been a fairly low quality water, and it's subject to the algal blooms in the Utah Lake. It's subject to now threatened with lake levels. And so reuse for us has always been about improving reliability and quality and dependability of a secondary source. So we're not dumping our really high treated drinking water onto lawns. So it's a really important project for us in this community, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with Representative Snyder and finding ways that we can accomplish both goals. In our situation, if we don't have to use the Utah Lake water, that will go on and reach the Great Salt Lake, and we can use the reuse water. So we think our situation is an example where we won't have a negative impact to the Great Salt Lake, because we'll take it from the reuse water instead of the Utah Lake water. And we appreciate Representative Snyder working with us and acknowledging that, and we support that.
Thank you. We have one question, Representative Stratton.
Thank you. So I appreciate the witness and what he's saying, and it's reflective, I think, of the spirit of the where we are on this bill. In that, look, there's, in a sense, you could say we're dealing with two issues here. We've got to be wise with our water and our resource, and if we can reuse it, let's reuse it. And then we have this issue with the Great Salt Lake and the impact. There is certainly, I think, some discretion that the state engineer should have with what we're doing. There might be times, if we go back to the 80s, might be times when we want to reuse the water and we want to keep the lake from getting too high and flooding. And so there's a balance here. And I'm assuming that the state engineer will exercise appropriate oversight in the permitting process. That's the idea. That let's coordinate here and let's do that. I do sense certainly a willingness by the good sponsor to work with the concerns that are being raised, and that this is fresh territory, kind of a newly plowed field in many ways for us in this area. I'm hearing we support it, but we need to make sure we're crossing T's and dotting I's, and I think the committee needs to make a decision. There was a time that the committee didn't recommend a bill generally until it's ready to go to the floor. But I've sensed a change in this committee this recently, that we're passing bills out that they'll continually be worked on. But I do appreciate the witness. I want to be sensitive to that and make sure we do get this right. It could be a good bill, but I'm sensing we still have T's to cross, I's to dot. To the witness here, it sounds like you're completely satisfied with the second substitute, not an issue. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Can I
Yes,
speak to that?
please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think where we're at is we're generally supportive and appreciate where we're at with the substitute, except for there's a few clarifying questions in our mind as to what approval of the project means. Because we have received, long ago, we filed change application and was approved to reuse the water through water rights. But we're now to a point where we are getting approvals with the Division of Water Quality to get a construction permit. And so we just want to make sure we understand is our situation, have we received approval? Or is there some other process that's going to
be required, and that's kind of generally where we're at.
And I think, thank you, Mr. Chair, if I could just, I'm sorry,
do.
but this is an important issue that deserves our attention, and I think good sponsors working through the issues. But I would say this: we need to make sure we understand. To this witness's stand, we've been working on this for 30 years. They're not the only political subdivision that's been working on water conservation reuse the last decades. I'm aware of, for example, American Fork City. They've hundreds and lots of money with lots of zeros behind it have been working. And the question is, what does it mean to have commenced, to grandfather, and maybe that's that the engineer would approve it anyway. I don't, but we just need to be clear that we're not that we're all on the same page, and I assume that that's some of the dotting of the I's and crossing the T's. So that's just
and
I'll say that.
Vice Chair, would you?
Thank you.
Are you
Representative
comfortable?
Snyder.
Maybe I just want to. So let me clarify some of that too. So obviously we're on, excuse me, the second sub. I would say 95% of what dotting and crossing is conversation in that. So all of the concerns addressed have been brought to our drafter and state engineer, and we believe this addresses them. Those that have spoken in favor, I've tried to capture every issue, and in a second sub, my commitment to this is I believe this bill is ready to keep moving forward. I think we are working in that regard, but I will say. My word is that we will not run folks over with this, that we will make this right, that we will make sure everybody feels taken care of at the end of the day, even at whatever stage in the process, just so what the committee knows what I'm hoping to do.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. Representative Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak to this? Seeing none, we'll bring this back to the committee for action and discussion. Representative Shipp.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I guess I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if we're anticipating a third sub?
Can I answer that?
Based on the cross the T's and dot the I's?
I don't believe there will be one, but I'm not foregoing that conclusion. So second sub came out this morning. That was the compilation of every edit that has been requested by the league and industry, I think, and the state engineer. So I believe we've got it right. I want to say for the committee, Patricia Owens is a saint. Just so everybody knows.
We already know that.
Yeah, okay. So this came out. I think some of that dotting and crossing has been done because she burned the midnight hour, but I can't say with any certainty. What I want you to know is I will fix whatever needs to be fixed, even if that means a third sub.
If I could, Mr. Chair, follow up.
Representative Shipp.
Just so what you're saying is probably these dot the I's and cross the T issues that came up are probably fixed in the sub, and they just have not had time to see the second sub.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Shipp. Any other comment or discussion from the committee? Seeing none, we need a motion to adopt the second sub. Let's see. Representative Benyon.
Motion to adopt the second sub.
That motion is to adopt the second sub of HB 349. Is that correct?
Yes.
That motion is in order. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I rule that motion carries. Let's see. Representative Owens.
Mr. Chairman, I out with a favorable recommendation, HB 349, second sub.
That motion is in order. Would you like to speak to that?
No, I'll waive.
Back to the to the sponsor.
No, I appreciate the motion. I think we're there.
But I want this committee and anyone here in the public to know that I will make sure it addresses any concern if any additional concerns exist.
Thank you. Back to the maker of the motion.
Waive.
The motion is that we pass out HB 349 Water Reuse Project Amendment with the second sub. And we'll need to do a roll call vote on this.
Representative Benyon? Yes. Bolander? Yes. Chu? Yes. Jimenez? Yes. Owens?
Yes.
Ship? Yes. Snyder?
Yes.
Stratton?
Yes.
Watkins? Yes. Vice Chair Lund?
Yes.
Chair Brooks?
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Representative Snyder. Okay, next bill, HB 188, golf-related water modifications. Representative Welton. Is he coming? There he is. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, for agreeing to hear this bill one more time. With the permission of the chair, I've got a handout that may not make sense initially, but if she can pass that out, I would appreciate it.
Please.
And Senator McKay was going to present with me, and he just took off because we thought we had one more. So I'm going to text him while I get started.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right, so just to recap real quick, this bill was brought before you last time. This is more for the public than the committee. And the original bill is to just have some transparency to taxpayers. 75% of our golf courses are publicly funded golf courses, and taxpayers support the golf courses. And we have a lot of discussion about water use. And so we're just looking for like a transparency and accountability bill, and which is kind of what this handout ties into for just briefly. So before I speak to actually, can we move to the substitute? We've worked on this bill a lot, and it's changed substantially since I was last here, and so we probably need to discuss the substitute.
So would you like to speak to the substitute?
Yes, if I may, please.
Okay.
Okay. So just backtrack. The problems that we're facing right now, we all know we have been in a prolonged drought. We live in a very arid state. We're spending $500 million to protect the Great Salt Lake, and because of its drying up. We are also a state that values taxpayer transparency, and water is a state resource. So current solutions that we've implemented, we've put over the last few years. Last year, we passed bills to put a water meter on every home. We're working on agricultural optimization, which will affect many people in this room. We're going to look at water, and we're going to look at ways to optimize that water use. We're cleaning up our waterways. And in addition, we're measuring other public areas. One of the questions is why just golf courses? So the handout that I gave you here, if I can talk about this just briefly, is we are currently measuring other places. So this is a good example of what I hope to happen with the transparency use. So if you look at there at the University of Utah on here, they have 19.3 million square feet. In 2020, they used 376 million gallons of water. In 2021, they used 399, but in 2022, they went down to 335 million, cutting their water use by 13%. One of my favorite ones is if you go over to Snow College, they actually went up in water usage in 2021, and they explained that the water usage went up because of something in the other section for more than 2 million gallons. The campus is still investigating the cause of this extra storage. This is something they're able to do because they have the data and they can measure it. And so this is kind of an important thing. So we're not asking for something that's any different than what currently exists in other places. So on to the sub. Let's just talk about that. The major changes, and there's a lot of changes. We've worked with the League of Cities and Towns for the last 8 months. We've had conversations with the Golf Association. I think the League of Cities and Towns will speak to this. They've been good with this bill from the very beginning. What we're trying to do now is the real goal is to decrease water use. And so in the substitute, we are going to we're going to commission Utah State to complete a water use study. This will be over the course of 5 years. During that time, water use will be collected, but it will not be subject to grandma laws. And we do that so the goal is that we can protect our water use and we can get to a better place without poking golf courses in the eye, so to speak, using previous comparisons. So the water use will be collected. It will be in a public document. We will compare course use in the state as well as looking at Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, surrounding areas, Nevada that are also dry states to see and identify the best practices. We'll also be looking at the possibility of licensing future golf courses and see if there's a good path forward that way. So when we're looking at water use in new golf courses, we're supportive of golf. They bring a tremendous amount of revenue to our state. But is there a better way to make sure that we're water wise and accountable to our constituents? The other thing this does is it adds a carrot, and we would be creating a $30 million grant to implement water optimization suggestions. So it's a lot of money, but we're going to go through and we're going to say, how do we best use our water? And now that we've identified these, we're going to give you a little bit of help to upgrade your water feature, your sprinklers, your greenways, fairways, whatever. And then they'll also be creating a golf advisory board to overlook this. Now, the one stick that still exists is after the 5 years, and we've done the studies, and we've helped you identify optimization rates, we are going to still ask that the water use is published as a matter of transparency where water is such a significant resource in our state. So that is the basic of the first sub, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does that conclude your presentation then, Representative Welton?
It does. Thank you.
Let's bring it back to the committee for clarifying questions. Representative Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. I'm seeing the sub that we've got a lot of times that we refer that Utah State University is supposed to help with what this is proposing. Have they been a part of the discussion?
We have talked to them, not in great depth, but Brian Steed said he would be happy to work with us on this.
So if I might continue.
Representative Chu.
So, we hear a lot every time somebody brings something up about how agriculture uses 80% at 75% of our state's water. Agriculture uses this water. Agriculture uses this water. Every time we turn around, we're hearing that. How much is golf course use considered agricultural use when we hear those kind of statements? Do you have any idea about that, Mr. Chair?
Not that I'm aware of.
Representative Welton.
That would be I was just curious about how that plays into that 75% accusation, I guess we'd call it. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you, Representative Chu. Representative Welton. Let's go to Representative Benyon.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to see this bill. I think it's addressing an important topic. I had a constituent write to me about a proposed new golf course in Park City, and seeing that we have the water engineer in the room, I wonder if we could find out if currently new golf courses need to have a water right assigned to them, or how that process works.
Let's see. Here comes the representative.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
welcome.
Blake Bingham, Deputy State Engineer. Teresa had to step out momentarily, but I think I can answer that question. As it relates to any beneficial use, a water right is necessary. In some cases, these golf courses may rely on water from the local municipality, so it really depends on a case-by-case basis.
Representative Benyon.
Okay, I guess so. So I think this just clarifies the importance of this study, that we understand where the water is being used due to the concerns we have with our water. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Chu, I think you have a question.
I have a question for the deputy state engineer. I guess that right, which are Mr. Bingham. Yeah. So my previous question about how much water is, whether golf course water is considered agricultural water, or then the way you just answered that made me wonder: is it sometimes maybe considered municipality water? If I suppose it depends on who supplies it, or how would that be measured?
Mr. Chair, may I answer?
Yes, Mr. Bingham.
Yeah, I believe so. That generally those figures come from the Division of Water Resources for their water budgets, but it depends on a large part as to how whether it's provided by a municipality or whether they have their own water rights, I believe.
Cool. That makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's go to, Representative Jimenez.
Thank you. So I understand the idea, and I like the idea of accountability on how much water we're using to keep all this grass green. However, I see a lot of my city and county parks doing the same thing, and it seems to me there's a lot more lawn and green areas tied up in city parks and county parks. Why haven't you included some of those other facilities and public utilities, public facilities in this study? It seems kind of like we're just targeting one area rather than addressing a larger issue.
Sure, that's a great question. The biggest issue partly comes from demand from constituents. Secondly, we are measuring some of that. So if you look at higher education and you compare what they're using, which are our largest public users, from like single institute, I guess when you add up all the city parks, and there's certainly more, but they're nowhere close to what the golf courses are using. But that could certainly be a separate bill, or if that's something that the committee really wants to add all together, I'd be happy to look at that. I think for me the biggest difference is if I go to a city field, a park, my kids can go play football, we can have a picnic, we can do anything that we want anytime without having to pay a fee to do so on top of the taxpayer dollars that was already collected, particularly in public golf courses. And so I do see them a little bit different. Like I see one as having taken a tremendous amount of public funding, and then you can only use it in staggered times, and if you pay a fee to use the golf course. And so I do see them different, but if that's what the committee wants, I'm happy to work on that to go a little bit more broad.
All right.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the underlying idea of this bill, which is to get intensive water users reporting, because I think shining a light in that sense can help motivate and promote discussion. I guess the concern I have is that we're picking on golf, and when I think about other intensive water using businesses like water parks, car washes, the ski industry, data centers, retirement homes with big swaths of non-functional turf, nonprofits. I see a lot of churches with lush big lawns. I'm just wondering, I think it would really be a lovely idea to broaden this and not have it be aimed at golf in particular, you know? Because I don't know that there's any, do you think there's evidence that golf is more intensive user than say the ski industry or a big, a data center or a...
Yes, the data centers. I know that the fight against data centers has happened in the past. My predecessor actually ran a water bill on the data center, and NSA did not like that because one of the big water users is the National Security Agency, not just a Facebook, and so there was tremendous pushback on that one. I can only surmise on skiing, like the water runs down the canyons into our lakes, when they use their water up there to make snow, it ends up back in our lakes and rivers, doesn't it?
I suppose so. But would you be amenable to an amendment that would broaden the scope of this to some other intensive users?
I'd be happy to look at a broader scope. I mean, water is a critical issue in our state.
And I was going to add, Representative Owens, just so you know,
Senator.
Or sorry, yes.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
Oh,
so would you please state your name?
Yes, I'm Senator Daniel Michael McKay.
Thank Please go ahead, Senator.
Sorry. I thought I was in trouble there for a minute, so I try to be respectful.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's why I used the full names. I thought I was in trouble. So if you look at turf buyback programs, and if you look at other activation programs that we have for water conservation already in effect, that water conservation districts and other things that we're working on that we passed last year, the one thing that got left out in our previous considerations, all of the city parks are currently being looked at from a conservation standpoint. Every city is motivated to move those things. The issue we have with golf is you have a high water consumer, you have a low daily user compared to the amount of people that are on it, but you also have a high social cost if they become inactive. You've got space that's just open and left fallow, so to speak, right behind homes. Creates a lot of security problems. People aren't back there. And so some of the alternatives, if we don't have a grant program and we don't really follow through with trying to meet all of those objectives, this is the one water user that was left out of all of our previous programming. And as we've talked to golf course owners and golf course users, this is the one that it's like, boy, it feels like we could do better. And I would just say anecdotally, I know of one course in the Salt Lake Valley whose plumbing is, they're still on iron ductile pipes, and they're leaky and they're losing a lot of water every year. They aren't exactly sure how much water they're losing. And so the problem is, as you look at it, is we add the accountability with the reporting part. On the other part, though, if you don't have the ability to help out those types of water users, you create a bunch of societal costs that come along with it. But really, to refinance those provisions, they're really expensive and really hard to try and figure out. And so our goal is trying to figure out, is there a grant program or is there a way to try and convert some of those public spaces, some of those community resources, so they can be more water wise than they are today. And really what it comes down to is the comparison between playable space and non-playable space that are both irrigated. And in Utah, we have not adopted more water wise standards related to golf like Nevada or Colorado or Arizona or some of the other states have done. You see, water requirements as far as how much and where, and the type of mechanism they need to have when they install. And so some of that stuff just hasn't ever been done. We haven't ever had to ask those questions. And other states are ahead of us on trying to answer these questions. And so really this effort is, maybe the grant survives. I don't know. Maybe, hopefully the accountability part survives. I think that's important. I think even more important than that is really trying to figure out the gap between where we are now and where we need to be so that we're the most water efficient from a golf using standpoint. Because, bipartisan golfers is a real thing, right? It's some of my favorite people to golf with are Democrats, right? I've often told people, and we're on public record, so I might as well. If I was ever given my dream foursome, one of those is Bill Clinton, and the other one is probably Barack Obama, which my friend has played with Obama, just because I would love to hear their stories. But unfortunately, the third one is Donald Trump, just because I want to watch the fight between all three of those.
I've always thought there'd be more Republicans on golf courses than Democrats.
I know it may seem that way, but
we're in bowling alleys, but we don't use much water.
Yeah. In fact, there's that's an interesting stat. I need to look that up. One interesting thing when you look at, well, it's political, not a big deal, but let me stay to the focus of the issue is, what can we do with golf this session to help it become just to modernize it and try and fix some of the systemic problems and modernize us? I don't know if it's everything in this bill yet. Don't know. We're still going to keep working with stakeholders to try and solve it, but I think Representative Welton was on the right track with some kind of reporting and accountability. That's certainly a component of it, but a whip with no tools is no fun. right? And I don't think anybody here is in favor of killing golf, so to speak. So,
well, I appreciate those comments, and I guess my parting thought is in Nevada, in Las Vegas area, when you get a business license, you got to also get a water license or something very equivalent. I may not be using the right word, and you got to justify, I'm going to produce this amount of economic benefit, and then they weigh that against your water usage, and they make a decision about whether they're going to let you have the water or not. And I think we're not there yet in Utah, but we need to trend that direction, and I see this as a springboard toward that, and I guess I have a little hesitancy about the bill because of the singling out of golf, because I think it's a broader issue, although you have reasons you just articulated for why you're concerned about golf. But I would love to see an amendment that broadened it, frankly. But anyway, you've heard my piece.
Yeah, well, and I don't think, Representative, that you're wrong at all. I will say the measures we took last year and the measures we're taking this year on, water buyback programs and, trying to create efficiency with turf elimination, that kind of stuff, you're going to see those common area play sources, get more water wise as well. I mean, that is certainly a thing. And I think it's a great question. I don't think we're against adding that consideration to the question that Utah State is to answer for us.
We've got to keep moving on. Thank you, Representative. Representative Owens, did you finish? Thank you. Representative Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I've had a major experience in this space. One of the concerns I have is there seems to be a presumption that golf courses are bad, that they're water hogs or pigs or whatever, if you want to say it. And the challenge that I have in this space is we see a problem and we rush to solve it, and sometimes we overcorrect. And perhaps some of the good that would come from this could be a more educated populace. The good sponsor said it's constituent demand to do this. And I think what we'll find is the wise stewardship generally in this space. Let me just give you, maybe to educate wise, how many of you, let me just ask you, is it better to irrigate when it's raining in Utah or when it's not?
When it's raining.
No, you might. So look at your faces. It's better to water when it's raining in Utah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. To have a good water coverage, it requires 1/4 inch of water to get to the roots. And to get to the roots, we struggle with issues like transpiration, which is the evaporation rate of the water as it's coming down. And how many times do we have a storm in Utah when the sun isn't shining, less evaporation, that is 1/4 inch or more? If we really want to be wise with our water, we would have the technology mechanism to turn our irrigation systems on when it's raining and measure the water to get that 1/4 inch. Now, you wouldn't think that, would you? I'll bet I shocked many of you with that announcement. There's a whole bunch of things like that take place here. You have, for example, the benefit of the water falling on turf, the rain that picks up particulates out of the atmosphere and cleanses the air, but carries with what it's cleansing the air to the surface of the grass. And then through that process, the turf cleanses the waters it goes through and harvests the nutrients there and puts them to good use to create oxygen. So we thought, well, let's get rid of all the grass. What a ridiculous idea. Yeah. But yet we all pat ourselves on the back saying we're doing good. What about the carbon that's in the air and harvest now the air? So I just caution us. I do have. I look at this one line that says they've got to publish and I'm all about being wise stewards. Stewardship is a key issue, but so now we have a private golf course owner, one of the 25% in our state, and they've got to now, and that's fine, they've got to give a report to the state engineer or whoever, but then they've also got to report this on a website. What the world does that mean? So I've got to go create another website and publish my water usage? Anyway, just my thoughts.
Thank you. Just by way of clarification, we've already had public comment on this, so we will forego public comment. Thank you, Representative Stratton.
Do you mind, Chair?
Yes.
Do you mind if we ask Representative Stratton a question? Go ahead.
I don't have a question, but just for clarification, it's just on the currently existing website that the golf course already has. There's no new website. But it's not too different, I guess, from this higher education brief that does the same thing, that publishes the data on a website.
And do you mind if I ask Representative Stratton, would you feel better if the reporting was to Department of Natural Resources and Natural Resources track that information and not have them on their website? Is that the question? I'm just trying to figure out how we get the water to the end of the row here without sending the wrong signal.
I think what I would say is I think it's helpful to be wise stewards and have reporting to someone that understands it. I just hate the concern that I have is we're putting information out there with those that I can see how that could be used as a club. Club to those that are uninformed on this issue, and I'm not sure the need to publicize it. You're gonna have. I've had people. I've been in. Just understand. There are times that I will water when it's raining, but doing that environmentally wise thing creates this whole bandwidth of questions I need to respond to as a result of uninformed individuals. And so it might be helpful to let's if we're going to be transparent, let's be transparent to those that have the information to understand it properly. That maybe is a principle, I would say. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Stratton. Sorry. Let's bring this back to the Committee for Action. Representative Bollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we hold HB 188 with its first substitute.
That motion is in order. Would you like to speak to that motion?
Yeah, just real quickly. It seems like as I listened to comments from members of the committee and earlier on when we heard this in public comment, it seems like there's lots of concerns about singling out an industry and also maybe broadening the scope of what's included in this bill. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Representative Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I support the motion to hold only because I think there's a lot of things that we need to look at besides just the questions that were raised. Does Utah State really know that it's going to cost them to do this? Where does that $30 million come from? You know, all the little aspects of it. So we have already a legislative water group that meets during the interim. And I think that's where we can decide, because we have a lot of money that's going out to help agriculture get more efficient heads or do a study. But we're kind of like operating outside that circle a little bit. Representative, I think you're dead on to something. I think golf courses, parks, cemeteries are huge users of water. And just like our higher ed, where we can evaluate those properly, I just think we need to spend some time and go through the summer process with the Water Legislative Advisory Board so we can vet these things out and utilize the programs that they have established for some of these funds to make sure that we can get to the goal where you want to be. Because I think the goal's valid. I think we just need to make sure that we're utilizing the processes that are in place to make sure that we vet all these concerns out before we get there.
Thank you. Representative Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also support the motion. I feel like that that there's a not a real need for this. I don't like the fact that we're singling out one industry, but I also feel like there's an atmosphere out there. No matter who you are, that you realize that we've got to be a little more knowledgeable about what's happening with our water of the state. And I think that golf courses, just like agriculture, want people to know how good a job they're doing. And so therefore I think it's the right motion on this bill, and it's the reason for the bill has been probably a good thought, but I feel like the fact that it's singling out one industry, it's not something that and also the questions that the chairman brought up, I think that it's not ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the maker of the motion. And back to the sponsor.
I appreciate all the input and the feedback that we've received on this bill. I do think this is a good bill and it's an important bill, particularly in the climate that we're in. I think Utah State is the best place to have these studies done. I think the interim commission will just say send it to Utah State and let them do the study. So from that aspect, I would prefer that the bill move forward or at least get a vote, but I am open to working on this over the interim. And Senator McKay has a comment he'd like to add as well.
Senator Daniel Michael McKay.
Thank you. So I guess I'm not sure I understand the committee's feedback, and I think it'd be important for us to understand it, I guess. What I understand is that the committee feels like it should be studied. Is that right?
No.
Okay. We don't feel like it should be studied, and that we shouldn't look at golf as a water user. Is that what I understand? I get the reason I'm trying to understand that feedback, because these weren't the questions. The
Senator
question
McKay,
wasn't.
We're offering you a chance to summarize on the bill, the motion before us as a whole.
I understand.
If there's a question on that, is because there's many questions about not only where the money goes, how the study's being done, the industries that need to apply. So we'd love to hear your summarization on it before we vote.
So I guess what I would add is, if we took this to the Water Task Force, the reason I'd speak against holding it is if we take it to the Water Task Force, all the Water Task Force is going to ask for is what? A study. So if the money, we don't know where the money's going to come from yet. And the reason we don't know where the money's going to come from yet is because legislative leadership hasn't told us where it's going to fit into the budget to answer that question. The other question, though, of whether or not we should study the issue and whether or not we should try and figure out water ways of doing this, I'll just point out some of the great places in Utah that are doing a fantastic job of this. When St. George is building courses in the state of, when they're building in their areas, they are focused on these issues. And they're focused on making sure that the playable area matches the appropriate ratios in the golf industry. And this is a question that St. George is doing, and I think they do the best of it. Brigham City recently went through and redid their course from a sprinkling standpoint, from their sprinklers, and they also took out a bunch of non-playable area. Let me tell you, one of the worst offenders of this issue, I'll just be transparent, it's us. Believe it or not, the state courses of Utah have some of the biggest water wasting going on in the state as it relates to golf. And every ounce that gets used on that course in the process of evapotranspiration is the process in Wasatch specifically where we have the most irrigated, non-playable space. And we spend a lot of money because that sprinkling system is more than 60 years old. We're some of the biggest offenders, and all that water does not end up in Deer Creek. And we don't know the answer to it because we don't study it. And so I would just ask that we, it's great if we hold the bill. It's not the end of the issue. My request is that we just not let another year where we're the problem go by. And that's the only reason I'd ask you not to hold the bill and instead give us a vehicle okay, there's objections. Let us work with the industry. There's still 3 weeks to do it. Let us work with the industry and try and solve some of those problems over the next 3 weeks. If you'd like us, we can come back to the committee to make that question. My ask was that you trust Representative Welton and I to continue to work with the industry to solve those questions, and that's why I am asking it not to be held. So, thank you.
Thank you. Back to Representative Bolander. The motion before us right now is to hold HB 188, Gulf-related water modifications, in the first substitute. Sorry? Oh, we haven't adopted the sub. We need to do that first, don't we?
I don't think we have to.
Okay, and the sub has not been adopted. So the motion before us is to hold HB 188 Gulf-related water modifications, and we'll do a roll call vote. Oh, Representative Stratton,
Substitute motion.
would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I'd like to adopt the substitute. Move to adopt the substitute and then speak to that, please.
Okay, that motion is in order to adopt the first substitute of HB 188 Gulf-related water modifications. And Representative Stratton, back to you to speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I think it's important we adopt this substitute. It's going in a better direction, so I appreciate that. I think in adopting it, I'm not ready to pass it out of the committee. I'd like to be able, perhaps potentially, but I think to the sponsor's point, maybe sometimes we can tailor this to just to the state-owned golf courses and see where we get with that. That would be a good start, but that would be an additional amendment. But that would be my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Stratton. And Representative Bolander, back to you to speak to that motion.
I'll wait.
Okay. So the motion before us is to adopt first substitute HB 188 Gulf-related water modifications. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? I rule that motion carries. Back to the original motion to hold HB 188 with the first Gulf-related water modifications with the first substitute, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Point of order. Just for, I'm not on the committee, so I can't comment.
Do we need a new motion?
You need a new motion to hold it. I was say you need a motion.
Representative Stratton.
So there's a little bit of confusion. It's very appropriate to go back. Once a substitute motion is passed, then you need a new motion generally. If it fails, you go back to the underlying motion, but there may be needed a new motion.
So we need to go back for a new motion back to Representative Bolander?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Am I?
Yeah.
Am I? Okay.
That would be proper order.
Okay.
So the first sub is
The notion is that the substitute motion replaced the underlying motion, and so that it's a clean slate at that point.
Okay,
yeah,
so he's got to restate
whatever
his
you'd like
motion.
to do.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, or whatever the motion is. Representative Bolander.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to hold the first substitute of HB 188.
Good job, Jeff.
That motion is in order to hold the first HB 188 with the first substitution. And would you like to speak to it?
No.
Waves. Any discussion to that motion? Representative Shipp.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the motion because as we've discussed this, there's a whole lot of things going on here. You know, we're talking about municipal golf courses are under the subdivision of a city or maybe even a county, if depending on the situation. And so I feel like as a state we need to tell these other subdivisions what to do. I think it's in their purview. If they're losing water, they have a problem. Certainly, I just think that there's more work to be done. And I'm not saying that I'm against what we're trying to do, but I just think if we can get this into, interim and have some more work on that, so I support the hold.
Thank you, Representative Shipp. I want all of our lights turned on. Representative Kohler.
Substitute motion.
Okay. So just, I'm sorry, Representative Kohler.
Substitute motion. Motion to adjourn.
That's a non-debatable motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Representative Chu. The vote's already started. Any opposed, say aye or say nay. Now we need to do a roll call vote.
Bolender.
Yes.
Chu. Jimenez.
Yes.
Kohler.
Yes.
Owens.
No.
Shipp. Stratton. No. Watkins. No. Vice Chair Lund.
No.
Chair Brooks.
Yes.
Okay. The vote is 5 yay and 6 nay. The motion fails with Bolender, Jimenez, Kohler, Shipp. And is that Bolender? And Brooks voting in the affirmative. The motion failed. Back to the committee for further action. Representative Chu. Wait.
No.
It would probably be better than so I'm going to restate that, and I'm going to move to adjourn. Will you give me a minute afterwards? Just a personal thing. Is that permissible?
No, you still have Bolender's.
You're on.
Mr. Chair. So committee, that motion failed, so we have to go back to the underlying motion, which is to hold the bill. Yeah. And then we can, because, would you like to speak to that?
But I can do a substitute motion, which would be the same thing. I'll back down and not do that. I appreciate the consideration. I was just gonna recognize a school class that came in. That's all I was gonna do.
Let's give Representative Chu, would you like to have a personal privilege before we take the vote?
I would very much appreciate a personal privilege.
Thank you.
Personal privilege. And what I would like to do, we've got a high school class that's traveled a long ways to come out here. They wanted to see a committee in action. And I was afraid if we all adjourned and scrambled out of here, we wouldn't have the opportunity to recognize them. Would you guys that are traveled here, the students, would you all raise your hands, please? See, we've got a pretty good amount of kids here. And you came from UNA High, is that correct? That's the high school I graduated from. I'm glad they're here with us today, and we appreciate their teacher bringing them out. They wanted to see a committee in action. I'm not sure they saw the best. They didn't see the best of us, but here we are. Thanks for coming, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I would propose a substitute motion. That's not permissible.
You know how twisted up
it's out of it's out of order.
I don't know if it's out of order, but
I don't think it's out of order, but we're going to ask the experts, right? I guess I
If
can.
we have a hard stop for floor
Yeah.
time. So if you wouldn't mind rescinding your motion so we can vote on this and move
I will
forward.
rescind my motion, and I appreciate the opportunity to
We are all
to
grateful.
show the students here that we are not always on task.
But yet we try to follow process.
We do. Like as Chair Brooks said, we have a hard stop here. If your comments are if you're dead set against or very much need to make your comments, or I'm more than happy to call on you. But we need to go to Bolander first.
Can I restate that for you, sir?
Yes.
The underlying motion is to hold the bill. Is there any discussion to that motion?
There we go. Okay. Having said that, Representative Benyon.
Yes. I agree that there's probably more work to be done. I think that the urgency is that we do address this bill this session, though, because if we're hearing that there are great amounts of water being wasted in our public golf courses, I hope we can hear this bill again this session and not wait till interim. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Stratton.
Thank you. I stand in support of the motion to hold. I think that gives the opportunity to do the corrections that are being proposed by the sponsor, and be glad to continue to work with sponsor and hear this again. Just by note, if water is escaping out of the systems, there's benefit to the groundwater, and we're working on replenishing our groundwater as well. And actually, groundwater is so much better for our water supply because it's not evaporating. We lose so much water for evaporation. Thank the sponsor, and it's so good to see those students from UNA. Now you know we're not perfect, yes? If there was ever a question, it's been confirmed that we're not yet, but we are trying to do the best we can, and thanks for bringing the light and energy in the room that you did. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Stratton. Representative Kohler.
I just had my light still on from last time.
Oh, okay.
No comment, thanks.
We'll go back to the maker of the motion, Representative Bolander. Representative Bolander waves, and the motion is to hold HB 188 golf-related water modifications with the first substitute. And we'll go to a roll call vote.
Representative Benyon? No. Bolander?
Yes.
Chu? Yes. Jimenez? Yes. Kohler? Yes. Owens? No. Ship? Yes. Stratton? Yes. Watkins? Yes. Vice Chair Lund?
Yes.
Chair Brooks?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with Representatives Benyon and Owens in the nay. We need one more motion. Representative Chu. Motion to adjourn, that's non-debatable. No, we're done. We're done.
Get to a good
Nope.
place. I think you can get to a good place.
So what did I miss that?